Good morning. Before we go into the message, I wanted to take an opportunity. There were several people in our fellowship who gave a lot of time and a lot of energy to help Iris in the last several weeks. And they didn't do it to be recognized, so I won't list names or anything like that. They know the services that they've provided, but I want to say thank you on behalf of Iris's family and Iris herself, but also on behalf of Harmony Fellowship. It raises our level of consciousness to have that love flowing through the people in this fellowship. So thank you. Thank you for the example and the service. The message this morning in the bulletin is called Spiritual Tension. What was supposed to happen, I had another school sermon to write, and I was given an obscure text from Amos in the Old Testament, and I'd almost come up with a message that I thought would go well with that, and it just didn't work. I wrestled with it, and it wouldn't give it up. So instead, this morning, the title of the message is The Power in Silence. The Power in Silence. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, in his book Talks in Truth, says, all power has its birth in silence. All power has its birth in silence. There is no exception to this rule in all the evidence of life. How is it that we find power in silence? How is it that we find power in silence? We know that we are one with God. We know that we are of God. And so our innermost being doesn't need to be told that, doesn't need to be affirmed for that. And so because nothing needs to be said, nothing is said in the deep down. And so from that place where we are one with God, where we know that oneness with God, that is the place where that knowingness allows the power of our lives to create, to become more than we would otherwise. And the Psalm 19 talks about that and talks about that idea very expressly in the first part of it. It says, the heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. So there's information going out. There's a knowing going out. But then it goes on to say, there is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. So that mystery, that idea that we know, there's a knowing within us, and yet there's nothing said. There's a knowing within us of our oneness with God, of the fact that all that we are is divine. All we are is of God. And yet nothing is said. And so that creates the mystery of who we are. And from that place, again, power is freer to be expressed, because we're not taking up energy trying to say it or to express it. We are just moved. We find ourselves being divine. We find ourselves doing that thing. And so from that place of silence, from that place of knowing, we see the power. There's a good example of that, a good story in the Old Testament that kind of highlights that whole idea. The prophet Elijah was an Old Testament prophet. He was a prophet about the few generations before the reign of Solomon. And when Elijah got a message to deliver, when Elijah came to know that there was something to be said, the Bible describes it, says, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. The word of the Lord came to Elijah. I like that way of phrasing it, that the word of the Lord came to Elijah. And so Elijah was good at what he did until he got a little tripped up. And what happened was, at this time, Jezebel is the queen of Israel. And Jezebel decided that she wanted not just Yahweh to be God, to be there to pray to and to seek and such, but she wanted to bring in others. And the one she wanted to bring in was Baal as a different god to worship, a different god to recognize. It was a Canaanite god from a different country. So she wanted to bring them in and as part of, so that people had a choice between the two, Baal or Yahweh, or God, whichever they wanted to worship. And so they had both of these. And of course Elijah is incensed. It's like, because he knows that the one true God, the one that he's trying to steer the people to, but they're confused. They're not sure which one is the real God. And Baal is the god of, among other things, Baal is the god of lightning. And so Baal brings fire from the sky. And so he's seen as being a powerful god. And he has all these several hundred prophets working in Israel for him. And again, there's a contest between, and the people are not sure who to believe in or who to side with. And so Elijah says, we're going to have a contest. We're going to have a pray-off. We're going to, but you and me against the prophets of Baal. And we'll both strut our stuff, and then the audience will text in their number for their choice of who was best, and we'll see who wins this contest. So what Elijah said was, okay, prophets of Baal, build an altar of wood. Build an altar of wood. I'll build an altar of wood. We'll both have these altars, and then you go first. You cry out to Baal, and you tell Baal, come down and burn this altar. Create fire. You are the God of fire from the sky. Come down and burn this altar. Make it disappear. And so the prophets of Baal start praying and doing their little dance and such. And it goes on and on and on through the morning, past noon, and still nothing's happened. Every once in a while, Elijah's kind of chuckling and interjecting. He says, what's wrong? Is Baal busy? Is something going? Is he in another room? Or is he asleep? Maybe you need to wake him up. And so he's razzing the prophets of Baal. And so they're going on and getting more and more hyper, trying to say, come on, Baal, do the thing. And nothing happens. Nothing happens. So finally Elijah says, enough is enough. And Elijah prays and says, okay, God, we need to know that you are the one God. Show us. And first he has the altar made of wood, and he asks these people to take water and to pour a large amount of water over the altar, and then pour that large amount of water again over the altar. 4 times they poured this large amount of water over and they built a trench around the altar, and there's so much water coming that they poured onto this altar. It was so wet that it filled the trench with water. So you can, this is some wet wood. Okay, this is some wet wood. It's going to be a challenge to get this started. The Boy Scout 2-match rule is probably not going to work in this case. It's going to take a little more to get this fire started. And so Elijah prays and says, okay, God, we need to know, so that your people can see who is the true God. Show us. And sure enough, fire comes down from the sky. It burns up the altar, and the Bible says it licks up the water out of the trench and leaves the whole place decimated. And so people know the real true God, the one true God, is Yahweh, and that they are the ones. And so it eliminates this contest between them. It's a spectacular way of showing off the work of God. And then Baal says, bring the prophets over to a certain place, and he has them all wiped out, has them all killed. And so Elijah has gone through this excruciating, draining experience, and comes to find out that Jezebel hears about what happened, that the prophets have been killed and all this thing has happened. And Jezebel has threatened to kill Elijah. It said, you're going to die the same way these prophets have died, and it's going to happen before tomorrow. And something happens inside Elijah. He loses it. Instead of the word of the Lord came to him, and just this knowing that God was God, knowing that all was going to be well, he starts to lose it. He starts to get afraid. And so he runs away. He runs away into the wilderness and says, "Oh, I'm done. No more. This is it." And so he lays down and he falls asleep. And the story says an angel taps him on the shoulder, and he wakes up and eats and drinks whatever and falls back asleep. He's pretty worn out. So he sleeps some more, and the angel taps him on the shoulder again, wakes up to eat, and says, "Okay, now you're ready. Let's go meet God." And so the story says that they walk up to this mountain, and they're going to meet to spend some time with God. And Elijah starts off, he says, "God, there's nobody left but me. Nobody's doing it right in that place but me. Everybody else has been killed, and nobody is doing it right but me." Have you been there? Felt the idea that you're the only one left that's really doing it right, and if they just listen to what I have to say, things will be better. And so Elijah says, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm the only one left. And so God says, "Let me show you. Come on up to this mountain. Let's talk." And so when he's standing there on the mountain, a great wind comes up and starts to blow, and it's blowing so hard that it's taking the tops of the mountains off and breaking rocks into little pieces. So you can imagine this is a big wind that's blowing. It's creating this spectacle in front of Elijah, and just again blowing off the tops of the mountains. And the Bible says God was not in the wind. After all that energy, all that show, all that spectacle, but God was not in the wind. And then an earthquake shakes the earth and does all that the earthquake does, shakes the mountains. And again, the Bible says God was not in the earthquake. And then finally a fire rages throughout the area and burns up all that's there. And then a loud raging fire goes through. And the Bible says God was not in the fire. And finally, what happens? A still small voice. A still small voice comes and just says, "God is here. God is here." And so that silence, that quiet, that stillness is where God revealed himself to Elijah to get him through what he was going through. Now, why all the noise? Why all the noise? Why the fire? Why the earthquake? Why the great wind? If God was going to come and meet with us, why didn't he just come quietly at first and just come with that still small voice? I'm not sure. The Bible doesn't really say why he does. I think one of the things might be God meets us where we are. God meets us where we are. And if we're in turmoil, if we've got all this noise going on inside of us and all this thunder and problems, all this whirlwind going on inside of us, that's where God meets us. He doesn't wait for us to come and figure it all out. He reaches to us in that time and guides us back to that place where we can hear that still small voice instead of being lost in that noise. And what is it that because when Elijah was running away and trying to get away from it all, there was no time in there where he heard the word where the word of the Lord came to him. There was no time where the word of the Lord came to him. And what was it that was causing the fact that he could not hear the word of the Lord anymore? And it was noise. It was noise. Charles Fillmore says that noise is the dying vibration of a spent source. The dying vibration of a spent source. Noise can be made up of a lot of things in our lives and keep us from hearing that still small voice, keep us from being able to live in that silence. Worries, concerns of the day that we might be focused on and see as more important than the fact that we are one with God. Something that might be in our conscience that we need to resolve that we haven't done so yet. Something that needs to be fixed. Any number of things can cause this noise in our minds and in our what's going on inside of us. And what's important to realize is that the noise cannot overcome the silence. The noise cannot overcome the silence. Emily Cady talks about the fact that the darkness does not overcome the light. The light decides what it will do. The light decides what it will do. And in the same sense, the noise does not overcome the silence in our hearts. That silent knowing, that oneness with God, the noise can't overtake that. The noise can't push us out. What the noise does is it lures us away from that silence. It lures us away from that place of quiet, that place of knowing. Sometimes it looks so energetic. It looks like it has so much power. The wind is blowing, the fire raging, and all this, and we get tempted. We get thinking, now that's power. This quiet inside, this knowing. Sometimes we want a little excitement. We want a little, and so the noise looks like it might be providing more energy, might be having more power than the silence offers. But the truth is, of course, that it's just luring us away. And this is not about pretending that we don't hear, not deluding ourselves that we don't hear. When I first moved here to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I lived in Irving. I found an apartment in Irving. And one day, as I was out apartment hunting, the woman at the apartment complex was taking me around a little golf cart and showing me, and I asked her very pointedly, I said, now we're right in the flight line for DFW. Do you hear a lot of airplanes flying over that creates a lot of noise? And right then, this airplane just flying, just rubbing in. And she looked at me with all sincerity and with all honesty, and she said, no. No, it doesn't. She wasn't hearing it anymore. She was not hearing the airplanes anymore. And I lived there long enough to realize and to know that situation where you don't hear the airplanes. You just, somehow you change what's going on inside to the place where you just don't hear that noise anymore. But that's not what I'm talking about when I say that the noise can't overcome the silence. The silence, we know what's going on. We can know what's going on and still live in silence. We can know all that's going on and still live in the silence. And it's a way of living that needs to be developed. It's a way of living that needs to be fostered, if you will, cultivated, living in that silence. It's not something that comes naturally to us with our fast-paced society, with all the things that we got going on. Sometimes it's fun just to be caught up in what's going on. And living in that place, again, of knowingness, that place of oneness, a place of silence inside, we can miss out on some of that. We can miss out on some of the power that's available in that because we're not cultivating that experience of silence. We're not cultivating an experience of knowing, an experience of oneness. And it takes time. It takes time. It is a commitment to take time to sit down, to keep those things clear that would become noise, keep a handle on what those things that would become noise. When we sit down and we're quiet for the first time in a while, or quiet after certain experiences, whatever, a lot of times when we're silent, we can hear what it is that we're actually thinking. Until we do, we just feel upset. We can just feel upset, and we just know that there's something going on inside, and it doesn't feel comfortable, and I don't know what it is, but and then we just try to stay away from it. If it would just go away and leave me alone, and so we stay. But if we take that time to be quiet, a lot of times what we're thinking, what it is that's causing the problem, will become evident to us. We'll hear the thoughts that are going through our head that's causing all that noise. And sometimes it's something that we need to take care of. Sometimes it's like, something needs to be handled. Something needs to be paid attention to. A lot of times what we'll do is realize it's just it's Chicken Little saying that the sky is falling, or some sort of nonsense that's going on inside our minds, but because we're ignoring it, we're elevating it and making it more important. Because we're not stop and listen to it and see it for what it is, it gets elevated and becomes more important than the silence. And so this life of silence is something that needs to be cultivated, needs to be developed by spending time in silence and spending time reminding ourselves of our oneness with God. And that is where we find the power. That is where we find the power, is in that silence, in that place. When there's noise, and we talked a little bit about that in the class, Sunday school class this morning. When there's noise and there's wrangling going on inside, I'm not as free to do what I want to do. I get worn out a lot quicker during the day. If there's stuff going on inside, there's wrangling going on inside, and stuff, I'm not as free to get done what I need to get done today, or to be who I want to be today. If you look back on times where we've been especially rude to somebody or something, a lot of times because that noise is just barking inside, and we haven't taken the time to sit down and find that place of silence, and it wears us out. So there's power in silence. The power is found in silence. As Charles Fillmore said, all power has its birth in silence. All power has its birth in silence. It's up to us to decide, are we going to live with the head banging? Are we going to live with the noise stripping us away of the power we might know in living? Or are we going to take the time to cultivate, to develop that place inside of ourselves of silence, that place of knowingness of God, and free ourselves up to live that full power of life that God intends today?